Our next session is titled Engineering Management for Early Stage Startups. Our next speaker is
John, I'm stopping you right here. He's about to announce me, okay, and we don't have time for this because I want to do something else. So for those who don't know it, this is like the 7th, maybe 8 pioneers, depending how you count. These folks are doing it for like 10 years. Their events, like Start Europe, Start Live, Start Vienna, all this kind of stuff is pretty much the founding bed of the, I would say, region, like the startup scene in this region, of the Austrian startup scene, definitely. Pretty much every single exit that at least I like, somehow roots back to their network, to their events, and to their daily freaking work. So instead of like clapping for me to go on stage and all this kind of stuff, can you do me a favor and clap for the Pioneers folks for 1 second? Please, let's go for this. Okay, ich nehme.
All right, so I've been stage checked. Thank you very much, Andreas. I keep it short. Andreas is the VP of Engineering at CoinList. He was a founder himself with GARMS that turned Pivot into Look. He was a founding team member of Product Hunt, which was acquired by AngelList. And he's seen the tech world from all sides, founder, employee, running tech teams.
You really hate breaking your routine, right?
And he's here for the 2nd time in Pioneers. And most importantly, now I want to share a story with Andreas.
No, we have no time.
But
I have 20 minutes.
10 seconds. So he was the first founder that I met in the Austrian startup tech scene back in 2009, 2010. Yeah. And they were like, changing things. They were hungry. They were foolish. They were bold. So thank you very much. You were part of it.
Likewise.
Now the stage is yours. Enjoy.
Cool. See you, mate.
Thanks.
Cool. So guys, is it on? Yeah, perfect. So my name is Andreas Klinger. So hi. I want to talk about engineering management, and pretty much all of the slides you have online. You just can find them on like my Twitter handle. I actually didn't tweet them yet. I will tweet them afterwards. Sorry for that. You can, at the slides, read everything I'm going to talk about here, and also you can afterwards just make sure that there's a few of the parts I had to skip here just because we had less time. All of that will be there. So quickly about myself. I was founding team of a company called Product Hunt. Who here knows Product Hunt? Nice. Wow. That's a lot. So for those who don't know it, Product Hunt is essentially, imagine the App Store and Reddit have an ugly baby. So it's kind of like a website where you launch your new project. If you do like a startup, a new product, this is one of the places where you want to launch it. Most people don't know this, but like the deeper you go into the community, the more features product actually has. So most people just know the landing page, but there's much more in there. So yeah, it's kind of like if creative people have enough time and enough money, they do a lot of stuff, I guess. Beginning of last year, we sold to a company called AngelList, which is kind of the LinkedIn for startups. If you, for example, like in Europe, I always recommend them for sourcing remote talent. So if you want to like hire remote engineers, highly recommend this place. Beginning of this year, I joined a spin-off of AngelList called CoinList. It's the shortest summary I have of it is essentially crypto stuff. What we do is compliance, investor background check, and all this kind of stuff for companies who do ICOs. In all of these cases, I did engineering management. The goal of this talk for me personally is I want to share a few high-level learnings from Silicon Valley and a few basic learnings from myself I had for engineering management. I will primarily focus on early-stage management, early-stage startups for one simple reason. I believe it's the biggest challenge we have here in Europe. So in America, if you launch somewhere in Boston or if you launch somewhere in Washington, doesn't matter, at the other side of the continent, people will pick it up. Like people in New York will hear about it. And just like this huge market will create such a pull that by itself you have a little bit more traction, easier traction than you have in Europe. So it's by far more important in Europe, where you have like all these fragmented markets, to be really careful about early stage traction and like having the early stage momentum. But when I talk to engineering teams in Europe, I usually hear about what technologies they use, like if they use, I don't know, Dart or if whatever they want to use currently. And they don't talk that much about market, product, traction, all these kind of things. Let me like show you like where this was for me like one of these moments where I really like understood it. So when I joined Product Hunt like before YC and before all this kind of stuff, we needed to build a recommendation engine. So we had products, and when people land there, obviously we want to recommend them similar products because they're most likely interested in this, right? And I knew I want to keep it simple, I want to keep it smart, and like ship this as fast as possible. So I looked first into like SaaS solutions for machine learning and all this kind of stuff, but this felt like a crazy overkill, right? We're like too small for that. So what I did instead is I just took a little graph database, built like a few scripts to real-time pipe all the data we have there, have a few scripts running there, and so on and so on. And this was, I would say, built fairly quickly, and I would have needed like 1 more week to get it to a point where I say, like, this is a confident result, like this is something I can show to people. And yeah, the reply of the founder was basically, can we just not do that? Can we just have a simple admin form where we just type in the posts that we want to recommend to each post, and we just like do literally all of this manually? And like, don't get me wrong, the results we had from the other one, from the graph thingy, was good enough. But it wasn't like ideal, it wasn't perfect, and it would have needed like 1 more week. But the goal wasn't like to ship in 1 week, the goal was to ship tomorrow. So we came to this basic agreement that I will just build this quickly, and then in my free time, whenever I have spare time, to just build the rest and like have build a proper solution, right? Yeah, turns out I didn't have much more out of spare time. So for quite some time, we literally had an admin form, and if any Rails developer here know like active admin, like literally like one of the most bare bones things ever, where people had to type in the specific ID for which post they actually want to recommend other posts, because I didn't really have time to build the type ahead neither at that point. But I shipped this thing like next day, and next day we had working recommendations. And this was a company that like Y Combinator invested in, Ernst & Horowitz invested in, Google Ventures, Greylock, like you name it, pretty much everybody. And this, to me, was kind of like this turning point. And to this day, technically, most of the recommendations you see on Product Hunt are still done by some human labor. We have the community suggesting them. We have community moderators whitelisting them. We have the makers and the hunters and all these kind of people still saying, yes, this is a good recommendation. And if there's no recommendation whatsoever, or if you want to do like a nice SEO page, obviously then there's like some automated generated like suggestions. But it works good enough. And for me, the big learning back then was basically, how can I launch this tomorrow? And this kind of saying, this kept like an auto repeat in my head. Like, how can we launch this tomorrow? And so like this kind of went into every discussion we had. So not like, because I mean, you all of this notice, like the scope was small enough, and you just like needed to ship. So I had this saying, which I said to every potential hire we had, is we kind of do everything manually, and just by accident we have web servers that actually ship HTML. And we kind of meant it. So for like a lot of potential hires, obviously they want to do like, I don't know, Google Tag challenges. This wasn't really interesting, but like this wasn't our goal. Our goal wasn't to build the intelligent solution. Our solution was try to be like as clever and as good enough as it can be right now. So anyway, we used this, and we talked about to every new hire, and we managed to actually get into the good position of actually hiring a few good people. And honestly, all of them were by far better engineers than I am. And this is a very good situation. And unfortunately, I was a complete control freak. So everybody who knows me, I'm still a control freak, but back then it was even worse. I had this goal to basically enable them to do the right decisions, because if I do not enable the people that I hire, like if I hire really smart people and I don't enable them to make decisions, I can as well hire, I don't know, less smart people, right? If they anyway can't use their smarts, like why spend more money, why spend the effort? So my goal was actually to keep them, to enable them, and to actually become a manager, but ideally not like a full-time manager in the sense of always sitting in meeting rooms, because I still wanted to develop stuff. And the team was small enough, like there's no point in having a full-time manager. So I needed to learn about this. Anyway, so let's talk about management, and I will skip a few slides, and you can afterwards look at them like online easily in your own time. I define management and leadership differently and separately. Like for me personally, management means defining processes and facilitating communication if those processes fail. And leadership for me personally just means providing a reason to go somewhere without the explicit path, and guiding people in case whenever needed, let's say it this way. And one aspect about leadership, it's not so much only about their current job, it's much more about them as people, about their careers and everything. So to make this short, you manage processes and you lead people. And for me, this distinction is very important, like this distinction between the process, the context, and the people. And we will get to this in a second. One thing I hear very regularly in San Francisco especially is like, we have no management, we have no hierarchies and all this kind of stuff. In my opinion, you always have hierarchies. Even if you like tell people that you're a completely flat company, it just means for new recruits, new hires, that they need to learn all these implicit, hidden hierarchies that nobody knows about, a part of the people who have already been there 3 years. And this is a very exhausting process for everybody. So you always have hierarchies, you always have management. Obviously, you don't want to like artificially create like larger than you need, but you have them. They might not be fair or good, but you have them. And the other thing is, a manager is not the boss. It's not the person who decides everything. That's not the job of a manager. A job of a manager is to define processes and facilitate communication. So you define processes that actually get decisions made. You define processes and you like enable people that the best possible decisions get made. And very often, you're more experienced than the people who work on something, especially if they're new hires. In these times, it's not the goal of you to actually teach or tell them what they should do. You want to kind of teach them how you decide. So you never tell them what you decide, you tell them how you decide. The other thing here is, if you are like a full-time communication hub, if your job is basically just communicating what other people decided to your team, and this is like your full-time job, this is most likely an anti-pattern, in my personal opinion. For example, at AngelList, we have this strong policy of nobody is a full-time manager, and everybody has some other part-time role. This, of course, depends on which layer people work, but like even the CEO does like helps with sales. Even like at CoinList, for example, the COO does a lot of the design, and obviously, like the COO is trying everything to hire more designers so he can like has like focus on the more important tasks. But in any case, it's not the job to be a full-time communication hub. The other thing about processes is a lot of people have this idea that the process is like this huge complex set of people communicating each other, like all this kind of flow. That's not a process. Process is expectations made explicit. So if we together come to a certain expectation and we make this explicit, this is something we do, this is a process. And this can be as simple as saying we do pull request reviews every morning. For example, at Product Hunt, it's a fully distributed team, so people work at completely different times. But if I say everybody does pull requests earliest in the morning before they do their own thing, everybody else knows when they ship something in the evening, like when they put something on for pull request in the evening, next day when they get on, somebody will have already looked at it. And this is something you can start to rely on, and this is something where you create a wheel. So to me, processes are expectations made explicit, nothing else, and they can be as simple as you can make them. Which brings me to the most important part here is you don't want to over-engineer your processes or your whole management setup in general. Companies or organizations like software scale. And when they get bigger, old patterns don't work anymore. And you need to refactor those patterns. So you kind of in this habit of every 6 months having a full refactor anyway. So you might as well just anticipate it and just say, OK, this is good enough for now. In 3 months, you're anyway changing most likely. Or in 6 months, you're anyway changing most likely. Another good pattern is to see what naturally emerges and try to make this explicit. And there's a very important distinction between explicit and implicit here. So for example, if I see that my engineering team already does certain things, and we agree this is a good thing, let's make this explicit so everybody can rely on it. If we introduce something where we're not sure if this is actually a good thing, if we really want this, like, I don't know, bug duty week, or like every Friday we do whatever, let's do it for 2 weeks, and have the explicit agreement in 2 weeks to reevaluate. If something is implicit, if people can do it if they want, then this is a very important distinction here again. And the important thing is problems will come. If you hate process problems while you're a small company, they will stay if you're a bigger company. They will always be there, they will just be different. And you kind of need to start just accepting that. That the important thing here for me personally was to learn that I'm not frustrated with the people, because they are frustrated as well. I'm frustrated with the context, with the setup where they're in. And they are frustrated with the same. So as a human, you feel like you're angry at each other. In reality, you're angry at the current setup. And all of you are like motivated, so all of you want to fix this. Which basically means that for me personally, people in context means output. So you can take, and for example, we did this. We hired amazing mobile engineers who couldn't work in our setup because we weren't like on the stage that they needed. Or we hired really amazing other engineers, and we lost them because they worked differently than it worked for us. But like my job as a leader in a company is to define these kind of context. And in a way, this is the main responsibility as a leader. And as I said before, just as a reminder, like it's not so much about like telling how to go somewhere, it's much more the path. And for me, the important part is actually the guiding. And this to me is like the people aspect of engineering management in a way. And for me personally, it's not so much about this person in their current role, it's about the person as a whole. So what I personally would recommend is, for example, every engineer in your team is going to stay 1 to 5 years, but they have a full life, they have a full career, and they want to evolve into like different roles, they want to progress and all this kind of stuff. Mapping together with them what would be interesting for them and how they can get there is one of the most important things you have to do, and you kind of want to use one-on-ones for that. You don't want to use one-on-ones for project updates. People who do like one-on-ones like every week but use them as a project meeting, in my opinion, do something wrong. Project meetings are meant for a project team, even if it's just you two, and one-on-ones is just for the person. Decisions. This is the hardest one in my opinion. I personally use one framework which I call decisions versus opinions. And in my opinion, pretty much everything we have regarding knowledge, worker management, we kind of have from factories. So we have this, even like in a hierarchy diagram, like the important people on the top, right? And somebody is above you and all this kind of thing. Like, this is a very weird framing if you think about it, because usually the people who do the work, usually people who build the product, are the closest to the customer, understand the most what they actually need to do. So actually, in a way, they are the people who should make the decisions, right? And this is kind of what we try to do. We try to push any decision as far as possible down, that the people who actually have to implement can make those decisions. And if they can't make the decisions, what do you need to do to enable them? What information do they need? Who needs to join these teams and all this kind of stuff? Because if they make a wrong decision, anyway, it's them who have to fix it. And at AngelList, we have this saying of she who codes decides. It basically means, by default, the project team and ideally the person who implements makes the decisions. And everybody else, including the manager, including the people who built the previous versions, are just adding opinions. Here, the important thing for me is I would highly recommend everybody to use OKRs. But obviously, you have a layering, right? And strategic decisions, you can't ask your mobile team to make the strategic decisions on the company level. This has to come, obviously, from the CEO or like from the higher level in the hierarchy. But like in this case, it's about the strategic decisions. Where does the company want to go in this year? What do they need to achieve? And each other team provides their suggestions and like their recommendations and all their goals as OKRs upwards. And like, this is a loop. More on this online. In my experience, it's not so much about the people. Usually, the engineers, for example, or like even any other team, they like ownership. They can manage it. They love it, actually. In my experience, the bigger problem is usually with people outside of the project team who think they should add their opinions, and people who are, for example, like you yourself, like the manager. And it's really hard. Like sometimes, obviously you want to support the project team, but sometimes you know something they don't know, or you have more experience, or you're just like really opinionated. And we have this saying of like, do whatever you want, but better be right. But like in reality, what we mean is you need to be also really careful as a manager, because your opinion has a lot of weight. If the founder of a company tells to the mobile engineer something, this is completely different than if Frank from accounting says something. So you as a manager, or even you as a founder, have to be very careful with what you actually say. And ideally, what I usually try to do is I ask to be proven wrong. So if I believe something else, I tell them why I come to this conclusion and how my decision process actually works. And if they want to try something else, prove me wrong. Prove me wrong in the sense of I insist on a proof. Like, how can you reframe this whole thing to a risk discussion? What is the risk we're willing to take in case either of us is wrong? So how can you prove it to me? The other one here is disagreeing and committing. So I'm OK, I disagree, but let's commit. And we have a date or whatever where we can reevaluate. Very rarely you need to do interventions. And these need to be very, very careful. And I specifically frame this as interventions. The CTO sometimes just needs to say, no, we're not going to use this new technology or this new language just because somebody likes it. That's not going to happen for these and these reasons. In these cases, again, you need to explain why. And if you have this regularly, you have a process problem. My biggest pet peeve is what I call drive-by management, which is kind of like you as an engineering team or like you as a team have already an agreement, and then somebody comes by, like the CEO or whoever, adds their 2 cents, gives like a completely different direction, and leaves the room again. This is one of the worst things that can happen in any company. Engineering team performance, and I will like go very briefly around this, through this. To me personally, it's never a team bandwidth issue. It's always a prioritization issue. It's never that your people work too slow. Most likely they just work on the wrong things. And for me personally, it's much more about building up confidence and what I call optimizing for single player experience. Because speed comes through confidence. And a capable, intelligent adult can make decisions on their own if this person has enough information provided. And anytime this person needs to ask their team, they lose a lot of time. So how can you actually enable people? And in engineering, there's a lot of things, like, for example, you can automate everything. You can make it easy to ship and show. You can make it easy to like ship something for 1% of your audience, for example. Or you can prepare for worst cases. Like sometimes somebody will be up at 2 a.m., the only person's servers explode. Or you can make meetings efficient. In my experience, if you do meetings really well, these meetings will lead to less spontaneous ad hoc meetings. And this is usually what people hate. Code-based management, I have a few slides online. Feel free to read there. So to sum this up, I personally would recommend treating your organization, as weird as this sounds, as software. Because you want to create small units, you want to share the ownership, you want to refactor acceptance tests and all this kind of stuff. But more importantly, you want to treat your people like capable adults, like intelligent people that you hire. You hire the best, then treat them like the best. In my opinion, if you micromanage people, you lose them. And the upbeat thing I was told to say, everybody was told to have like an upbeat end, is, in my opinion, as a manager, everything that happened in your company is ultimately your fault. Everything bad that will happen. You defined the processes, you basically guided the people, and worst case, you hired the wrong people. So everything in the end is your fault. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Annie.